Good evening, this is the Oscar expert here, and I want to talk about Richard Linklater's new film, Apollo 10.5: A Space Age Childhood. This film's been on Netflix for like a week, and the buzz has been kind of low, but I did decide to check it out. And we're late to the party, but I'm glad that we're at the party because I think there is a party to be found here. At first, I was a little dismissive over this film because I was like, oh, Richard Linklater, he probably just made like a charming movie for kids. But really, I wouldn't recommend this to a children because what I get out of this movie is what I get out of a nice, nostalgic, sort of meandering Linklater film, like Everybody Wants Some and Dazed and Confused. I think this film offers a lot that those films have, and it fits nicely within the body of work that Linklater has built up. Like, as I was settling into this movie, I was like, oh, we are watching a Linklater movie. This feels nice. I like it. It chronicles one summer of a 10-and-a-half-year-old boy growing up in Houston in the late 60s during the Apollo 11 moon landing craze. This is also Linklater's third animated film after A Scanner Darkly and Waking Life, and it is rotoscoped, so they shot it on cameras and then they traced over it later. And I'll get into it later, but I think that effect is really integral to the movie. The trailer made this seem like a fantasy movie in which a boy goes to space, but that's not really what happens, and even the movie kind of tricks you into thinking that that's going to happen in the beginning. The movie is not an adventure film. It's really just a nostalgia trip. More than half of the movie is like, we used to go down to the water park. We used to go to the beach and like pick up sand. It's kind of a strange movie. Like almost the entire thing is narrated by Jack Black, who is the older version of our protagonist Stanley. He is never seen in the movie, but he's just narrating it. I didn't even know that it was Jack Black because it sounds like Jack Black took all the Jack Black isms out of his own voice. Once again, Linklater is defying a lot of the conventions of storytelling. There's very little conflict in this movie. If there's a character arc, I hardly even noticed it. Our main character isn't really very developed. Linklater isn't concerned with giving this kid an abundance of interesting personality traits. He's kind of just this every kid. There's narration for a lot of the movie, which might normally bother me, but I really think that Linklater made it work here. This movie is like having a cinematic picture book read to you. It just paints a bunch of different vignettes and little pieces of the childhood of this main character, who is very likely, based on Richard Linklater, who also grew up in Houston and was about this age during the moon landing. Each little bit of this child's life that we get to see is so beautifully detailed that it made me truly nostalgic for a time that I did not live in. It made me want to be that fourth grader playing pinball at the bowling alley, trying to get some extra plays. It made me want to gather around the TV and watch television with my siblings in the living room for scheduled programming. There's a part where the character is describing all the wonderful shows that used to be on TV. It was overwhelming how many shows there were to watch. And we look at that now and we're like, buddy, you don't even understand. But it's so charming, and the way that it taps into nostalgia feels so universal. I think it's really cool that I felt nostalgic for somebody else's nostalgia while watching this movie. I think that was a really cool experience to me. Because even though nostalgia is personal to everybody, there's definitely something universal about it. We all feel like we remember this time where things were more pure and simple, even if they may not have been in reality. And the movie doesn't exactly ignore the darker sides of the time. The Vietnam War is happening. People are scared about overpopulation and pollution. The main character lives in the generation where they had to hide under desks for bomb drills. I think all of our childhoods are kind of like this in some way, where we can look back and see how we missed a lot of the context and a lot of the darker sides of the time that we were growing up in. But since this movie is from the perspective of somebody looking back on their childhood, it kind of just mentions these things, and then like a child would say, it goes, let's just go play. We can't think about this right now. As Stanley says in the movie, everything in his town felt new, and there was no semblance of history in sight for him. And to me, I think that's kind of beautiful. The movie's saying, don't feel guilty about the ignorance that you once had. That ignorance that you had was beautiful, and it is okay to cherish that. The moon landing felt like this event that everyone was a part of, that represented hope for a future where a lot of our problems could be solved. Something new was just on the horizon, and that sort of feeling of American exceptionalism that people had during the time. And Linklater definitely seems to be paralleling that feeling to the nostalgia that he felt in his own childhood. In many ways, America has nostalgia for the days of the moon landing. If you look closely, this is not a movie about someone's childhood. This is a movie about the way in which somebody looks back on their childhood. That's why the narrator's an adult, not a kid. That's why the movie is animated and not live action. We don't know if the time that Stanley was in actually felt this good when he was in it, but that's just the nature of memory. Like, we can never truly go back and know what it was like to be there. We only have the way that we remembered it. There's a quote near the end of the movie where his mom says, even if he was asleep, he'll think that he remembered it all. So I just think this is a really great movie about reflecting on your childhood. It felt very personal to Linklater, and I feel like it's no less significant than a lot of the films that he's done. I would give this an 8.5 out of 10. When it ended, I thought it was an 8, and then I thought maybe I'm creeping up to a 9, so I'm not really sure where I lay on that, but I think it's really good. I think it's worth your time, especially if you're into Linklater. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Do you remember going to the moon?